Oh, yeah, right. Welcome. I'd like to call this Finance Committee meeting to order. The first item we have on the agenda is assignment of requests for council action. We have many this evening for the Finance Committee. We have 22-162, resolution to adopt update comprehensive plan. 22-163, CHIP grant private rehab 412 West Washington Street. 22-164, CHIP grant private rehab 30 Circle Drive. 22-165, target of opportunity grant contract AM Plumbing BWS. 22-166, target of opportunity grant contract Calvary Mechanical BWS. 22-167, transfer general fund to police fund. 22-168, budget amendments. 22-169, transfer general fund to railroad fund. 22-170, transfer MCRC operating to MCRC capital fund. 22-171, transfer to general fund to the parking fund. 22-172, advance general fund to airport funds. 22-173, advance street stormwater fund to grant fund OPWC. 22-174, establish new fund, special projects fund, One Ohio Opioid Settlement Fund. 22-175, JCG payment, Carlisle Brake and Friction Products. 22-176, adjustments to purchase orders and budgets due to fuel cost. 22-177, increased expenditure to Davis Tree Farm Forestry. 22-178, amend planning and zoning code 113702 and 113704. 22-179, increase PO 22-684, Epic Aviation. 22-180, increase PO 22-594, Pradco Police Department. 22-181, JCG payment, Sandwich Food Corp. 22-182, grant application, Ohio Criminal Justice Service Grant Muni Court. 22-183, approve ARPA funds for Fire Station Number 1 HVAC. 22-184, deer hunting program, LAM. 22-185, 2022 city auction. 22-186, approve ARPA fund project, Monarch Carpet 1. 22-187, increase PO 22-689, Cocosing Service Department. 22-188, bid discussion, South Court curb replacement program. 22-189, loan application, Ohio Public Works Commission. 22-190, agreement with county to operate and maintain city sanitary sewer system. 22-191, amend ordinance 12022, emergency state route 18 water line extension. 22-192, cooperative purchase for fitness equipment for the MCRC. And finally, 22-193, purchase firefighter turnout gear. The next item we have on the agenda is 22-162. It's adopt comprehensive plan update. Mr. Dutton.
Yes, you have an RCA before you requesting a resolution to adopt the proposed update of the city's comprehensive plan. It was unanimously recommended for approval by the Planning Commission at their July meeting. The process to update the plan was initiated in spring of 2021. The city chose OHM Advisors as the consultant for the project. They're a well-established planning, architectural, and engineering firm with a lot of experience in comprehensive planning. Aaron Dominy is here to give a presentation and answer any questions or comments you have regarding the comprehensive plan. I'd just like to note that the process incorporated a large amount of public input in a variety of different formats. There was a large steering committee which guided the process throughout. There are actually 26 members on the steering committee, which is pretty large. And I'd like to note the creation of the plan took into account a lot of feedback from the public, the committee, and the administration. So the result is a very usable plan that's well suited for the city of Medina. So with that, I will hand it over to Aaron.
Good evening, members of council. Thank you for having me here tonight to present the culmination of this work with you. I'm going to do my best to move efficiently through this slide deck. I know you guys have, looks like some important business to take care of tonight, so I'll try to talk about 20 minutes as fast as I can, a lot of information. So this is about 12 to 14 months in 20 minutes. Obviously, you have the plan to look through, and if there's other questions, we can do follow-up, but I'm just going to jump right into this and ask my slide advancer to advance the first couple slides here. Just keep going, if you would. So Andrew introduced us. We're an architecture, engineering, planning firm. Have about 600 people throughout the Midwest. We kind of bring all those services together to create great solutions for communities to help them advance forward. Last time we worked with you was on the downtown plan, which was about 7 to 10 years ago. Here we are back with you all today to update the comprehensive plan. So thank you for having us back. Next slide. One of the, I talked about the downtown, and I think that was one of the other decision-making factors that brought us here as we work throughout Ohio in communities like yours, county seats, downtowns, and your downtown's a really important component of this. So just kind of showcasing some of the work that we've been doing around the state. Next slide. And next slide. So I wanted to give you an overview of our process. This is very simplified version of what we did and kind of how we did it. So this was a 5-phase process. It started with getting organized and investigating, which meant we looked at a lot of technical data. What were the trends within the community? What are some of the things happening physically within the landscape, within the urban form? How land use is currently being used? And then we went into phase 2 and 3 to build on that. And ultimately, phase 3 was the community engagement component, which I'll talk a fair amount about tonight. There's 2 pieces to the process. There's always the technical information that we bring as consultants and the research we do, and there's the intuitive side, which are the voices of your community, what we learned, what we heard. And our job is really to bring those 2 together to work into phase 4 and 5, which is ultimately developing the plan. And in simple terms, that's how this project came to be. Next slide. And here we are in phase 5. So I want to talk a little bit about the purpose of the project, and I apologize, my cadence is a little off because I'm not controlling this advancing of my slides here. So if you could just keep clicking here. One of the things we wanted to do was build upon some of your existing plans and documents. So we looked at a lot of the work that's been done here, some of the work that we touched, to build on that and to guide you moving forward. And then click again. And the purpose of this document, it's really your blueprint. I mean, you can't build a house, you can't build a shed, you can't build anything without a set of plans to know what you're creating. Your comprehensive plan is one of the foundations of what you use to operate your city. And any good development decision or land use decision has a 2-test step. The first is, does it comply with the comprehensive plan? Second test is, does it comply with your zoning code? And those are the 2 things by which you make informed decisions related to land use within your community. But it also includes other elements that inform other parts of what you do, like your capital improvements plan, your budgeting, and programs and policies as well. Next slide. Click again, please. So in terms of what that blueprint does for you, it identifies target areas for redevelopment, helps you steer public dollars to spur private investment. It identifies the greatest opportunities or areas for development, which I'll talk a little bit about in this presentation. And then it serves to guide and inform future decision-making related to redevelopment opportunities. And that also talks, and the last bullet is about guiding future zoning decisions. When you make any zoning change, the first place you should go is your comprehensive plan to see it complies and aligns with your comprehensive plan. So it's a very important document to have, whether you're growing inward or you're growing outward. Most of your growth is happening inward, and zoning changes over time. It should comply with the plan. One of the things that we spend a lot of time on here, because you're a relatively built-out community, are focus areas. I don't want to read through all this text, but essentially what focus areas are there areas within your community, within the plan, that we dug down a little deeper. So most of the plan operates about an 80,000-foot level. It's intended to be general in nature. These focus areas got down to about 10,000 feet. We really got into some detail related to public improvements, private investment, and tried to bring some things to life in those areas that had a little bit more specifics related to how it should be developed in the future. Next slide. So I want to talk about community engagement, and we can keep going here. This is a very important part of this project, or any comprehensive plan really, that is undertaken by your planning consultant. Here are some of the things that we did as part of this process. We did an online survey. We did pop-up events where we just met people in the community where they are. We worked on social media. We had engagement boards that went out into the public, and we did virtual presentations to engage people within this community. And the next slide is going to show us by the numbers. So we had a little over 500 people engaged over a core 3-month period, although we did engage later in the process. Again, you see those 5 methods there, and then some of the statistics around some of those engagement efforts, like 390 people responding to the survey that we pushed out as part of this. And just some eyewash there. These are some of the things that you saw in your community out and about, kind of building interest and awareness of the project. These were flyers. These were things that went on social media, on the comprehensive plan website. this is the type of information your community would have been used to seeing during the process. And just some great pictures of folks here engaging. Maybe some folks in the audience are actually up on that screen. I think this was the farmer's market where we were meeting people to talk to them. Okay, let's talk about the plan framework here. By the way, the person advancing the slides, got a good rhythm here. Let's keep this going. These are your plan elements, okay? So those plan elements are essentially core chapters of the plan. And they are housing, mobility, economic development, and stabilization, land use, and quality of life. Again, you see the key inputs on the top there, those 3 circles. I talked about the technical, which are existing condition research, the intuitive, which was the public input, and the other thing that we bring are just best practices to the project. Coming out of that, we have a set of principle and vision statements that guided each one of those plan elements and objectives. So in total, we have 5 plan elements, 22 objectives, and 101 strategies. It looks like a lot in the world of comprehensive plans. That's actually pretty light, and we like to stay light and nimble in the plans that we put together. And we can keep going. I spoke too soon about our rhythm.
He says it froze out.
Frozen PDF. Okay, well, I can call an audible here. Well, nobody will see the laptop. Okay, well, I'm going to go back while he tries to close and reopen that. We'll try to get back on where we are, and I'll talk to you through the slides that are not on the screen. What are the core elements of the plan that you'll find in there? That is the page that gets worn out in every planning director's book or planning commission's is the future land use map. That is one place that is most heavily used, and you can keep flipping ahead, see if you can catch up with me on the map now. That's where I'm at. Keep going. We can keep going, keep going. These are the mechanics of your plan, folks. This is what it looks like inside of the plan. These are the goals and objectives. So just wanted to give you a look inside of one of the chapters. You see on the left there, key findings, things that we learned, ultimately how that helped build the plan, the vision statement, and then there's the goals and objectives. Each one of those goals and objectives are going to have a responsible party. Those are little icons in black that you see there of who should be working on that element. And then on the right, you'll see a time frame, which is when do we want to see that thing done. So this is something council should be looking at. It's something your director head should be looking at, planning commission. Everybody needs to work in concert to kind of make this plan go. It's only as good as the users. Next slide. Keep going, please. All right, this is kind of where I was on my audible where I left off. All right, if we click forward, we should be able to see the future existing land uses. This is how land use is used today. This is some of the research that we did, and you're pretty balanced in terms of the types of land uses that you have in your community. There are a lot of communities that we work in that are 85, 90% residential, your quintessential bedroom community. You have a pretty diversified land use typology, which is great in terms of creating balanced economic growth. And if you click on the next slide, I think it says that. Yep. And so you're diverse and balanced, which is great. And so we wanted to continue to support that within the future land use plan. Next slide. So this is that future land use map I was talking about. We did simplify this from what some of the things you have been seeing earlier by the number of districts that we have. So this says this talks about how land should be used in the future, not how it's used today. And for everybody in the audience, don't freak out if you see your property in there and it's not the exact color of your zoning. This is more general in nature. And there is no forced zoning, but if an applicant, a property owner did come forward and say, I was interested in changing my zoning, this is the map that it should comply with and give you direction to make that informed zoning decision. We also looked at some of the existing transportation conditions and networks, and if you click forward, I believe that the next slide is the map, which is the future. We took some time to look at active transportation. So these are routes that are not specifically for motorized transportation, and where those should be. This is essentially setting the table for you to do a non-motorized master plan. The key with this, though, is what are we trying to connect? Where are we trying to connect to? These are corridors within your community that ultimately link to destinations like places of business, entertainment, schools, that type of thing. So these are places we want to build that network within your community, which we have some of started, but there's a lot more work to do to become a truly connected community through the non-motorized space. So this is probably the area that you might be most interested in. This is the finest level of detail in the plan. These are the focus areas that we looked at. So when we work in communities that are relatively built out like yours, we want to look at places that maybe aren't being used at their highest and best use, or in transition, or maybe you're seeing pressure for them to grow or evolve moving forward. So next slide. So one of those was North Court, or what we called the North Court District. And if you keep clicking, this is that study area. So all the way over to the candle factory, then extending back in towards the core here. This is an area that kind of has a couple of different transitional uses in it. And one of the things that we talked about was the entry sequencing in from this district into the downtown core. And so one of the things I'll show you here in a second is how do we want to treat that streetscape and those transitions to make it safer, more comfortable, and complement both the existing and future uses. Next slide. In terms of the future land uses, that has a future land use designation on it. This aligns with the future land use map. And we have some character imagery that describes what that is. And then if you click forward, then we have a semblance of how that could be redeveloped. And I apologize, when I was talking about the candle, I was actually thinking of a different district as I'm talking quickly here. This is up by the commercial power center that you have on the north side of town. So this is an area that is in transition. There are some vacancies here, and a lot of these commercial centers are not performing how they used to, right? With the evolution of e-commerce and people changing their shopping habits and lifestyles, they're starting to age and need to be reimagined. So in this North Court district, this is a place that we were looking to reimagine, and one of the core uses we integrated in here was residential. Most of these districts that are commercial centers today that are maybe underperforming, maybe not performing at their highest and best use, one of the best uses to infuse into there is residential, and really create this district-like atmosphere, the small live, work, play kind of experience within that place. So we were mindful of the area that wasn't performing maybe as well as it could be, protected parts that were performing better, and the frontage along Court Street there. And then we actually evolved that to show how this whole area could be redeveloped moving forward in the future. So if you go to the next slide. Okay, we're going to bounce into the next one, which is West Liberty. This is where I was earlier in my brain, and I apologize. So West Liberty, keep going, please. This was the district I was talking about earlier as we make that transition from the western side of the community into the core. And it really was about safety, comfort, aesthetics, how we start complementing the core area in terms of the streetscape and the amenities, and what can we do here to complement that, but also control traffic and manage that in a way that is intentional. I've been working in this community now off and on for almost a decade. And a lot of communities like yours that are county seats with state routes, truck traffic is always coming up. And it's a necessary component of who you are, but it also creates some points of conflict with how you want to evolve moving forward. So in this particular area, that was one of the things we were actually focused heavily on, which is how do we reimagine West Liberty to be more of a complete street and to manage the traffic in a way that not only complements the surrounding land uses, but addresses that truck traffic without removing it. That's a huge lift. And of all those downtowns I've worked in, there is no solution to say we're just going to move truck routes. That is easily done. And in many cases, many communities don't want to do that. So if we go to the next slide, we looked at the future land uses in this area. And so I'm going to ask you to keep advancing here, because really what I wanted to get to was the next slide, which should be the streetscape. So we looked at two different typologies in here along West Liberty. You kind of see the A and the B there. B being closer as you get to the core, and A farther out towards the western edge. So that's a transition area on that streetscape. And we're looking at ways that we can calm that traffic, add some amenities in there that are aesthetically pleasing, and use something you can manage your existing traffic on, but optimize the right-of-way that you have there. We have enough right-of-way where we can actually be a little bit more creative do things in narrow lanes down. I won't get into the cross sections of those lanes and how big they are, but some of them are, they're a little oversized. So you have some room to do things a little bit differently. So if we go to the next slide. So we started to imagine, what does this start to look like? This is the proposed commercial streetscape within the corridor. This starts to imagine and conceive things like having parking in some areas, tightening down the actual curb to curb distance. And the intention there is to actually slow traffic, not limit it. Can still move safely through. We can still meet ODOT standards. But as we start to pinch that down with amenities and the curb widths, it's an intention to slow that traffic, and to the driver, to the truck driver, that cues them to go a little bit slower. So that was something we were looking at very closely here, and I could spend a whole meeting just talking about this streetscape, but I have a lot more to cover quickly. Next slide. And this is one of those proposed residential sections. So we have the two different sections. One's a little bit more commercial focused out towards Route Candle, and this one's a little bit more focused on the residential component as you get closer to the core. So they're getting treated a little bit differently based on the uses that are up next to them. For folks that want to look at this in detail, this is going to be online. Almost all these slides are online, and the draft plan. So I talked about this being a little bit oversized, and we have 15-foot drive lanes there, and those are significant, and they don't necessarily need to be that wide. So we have a lot of room to kind of work with, and a very large amenity zone at 13 feet on the one side. Next slide. And so this is a section showing how we're kind of reimagining that, bringing those drive lanes down to 11 or 12 feet, providing parking as an option, and different amenities in that amenity zone to give it a little bit more complementary feel to the core. Now, for everybody in the audience who's seeing this is a pretty picture indeed, and that's what it is. It's intended to be visionary. Any project like this is going to take detailed study. There's a whole other level of study that has to go in to make this happen. We know enough from best practices and doing streetscape work and DOT work that this is something that we can advance and get approved, and will meet standards. But there's a whole other process to move this forward. And essentially what this plan is saying is, this was a priority for the committee. It was a priority through the process, priority to complement future land uses, and it's something you should be looking at moving forward. And you can keep going. We're going to skip through this one and this one. That's just the residential section. Keep going. All right, so one of the other focus areas we looked at was what we called East Smith focus area. So this is just on the other side of town here. And keep going, please. So this area was really interesting because we have some, this is another area that's kind of a transition. With the downtown being as successful as it is, things happening in Southtown, there's some opportunities here to intensify some of these properties. And the idea there is to do a couple of things. If you look at some of the goals in the plan, the diversity of housing and attainable housing was a really important goal. So it's probably a mix of housing options for people at different income levels and different points of life. I think you've had a lot of success here with like Farmers Exchange, and we've seen people even on our committee make different life choices to downsize and move into something a little bit differently. Same thing on the other end of the spectrum. Young professionals, it's not the American dream to buy that house, when you're 20 to 35, even 40. People are waiting longer, so we have to have housing options for them. When they're at their highest creative level, when they're younger, and highest disposable income when they're at the other end of the spectrum. So the large single-family detached house isn't that dream anymore for a lot of people. So when we look at places like this, we're trying to reimagine how we can develop it contextually, start to provide more housing options, and drive the economy, providing new income-generating uses. So this is one of the goals for this area. Next slide. So again, a little bit finer grain look at the land use typologies. Mostly this is mixed residential, mixed use that we're looking here, not trying to provide a single zoning typology, but allow a more creative mix of uses to happen here. Next slide. Then we looked at how do we start to imagine how this area could redevelop. And again, for everybody up on the dais and for the audience, this is not a development plan that somebody's filed with the city. This is intended to be a visualization that says, how can we graphically illustrate what the intent is here? So whether a building's a horseshoe, a circle, a square, to be determined. But the intention here is that there's a mix of uses. You can see one-story commercial, and then upper, second, third, even fourth story could be residential uses. That really complement a lot of the businesses in the downtown and the commercial that would be part of this. So we want to get a mix of uses. And we have a lot of changing in the market right now with how we're going to start collecting income tax. So this is Finance Committee. You guys are probably pretty well dialed into that, of what's happening in the landscape. We used to chase to hold the carrot out there and chase the big business to get here. And now there's opportunities to collect income tax where you live, not necessarily where you work. So that's changing our whole game in terms of how do we want to see redevelopment work moving forward. Next slide. Just a different level concept. This starts to push farther out to the east into more to that innovation zone. There's some city-owned property in there. Again, just taking uses that are kind of lower intensity and looking at ways to intensify them, create more housing options, more income-generating uses closer to your core. Okay, let's keep going. There's some good character imagery there. Again, if you look in the plan, some of these pictures are intended to articulate the intent of the type of development that the plan envisions for that area. Okay, Southtown. I believe this is our last focus area, and I'm getting closer to my end here. Again, 12, 14 months and 20 minutes. So Southtown was an area that our committee had a lot of affection for and interest in seeing what happens there next. It's a big area. And, I guess after many iterations of this, and we have some committee members up there sitting next to you, we looked at this many different ways, and actually the simplest version was to think of this as a district. So, there is no residential here, commercial there, office there, restaurant there. It is intended to function as one place. And so the whole place in the plan is identified as mixed use. It gives you a lot of flexibility in the district. Anytime you guys travel and go to great districts, you notice you're not really paying attention to the uses as much as you are the form, the character, and the energy of the place. So that's how we're transitioning a lot of the work that we're doing in planning, is looking more at the form and the character of that development, not necessarily what the use is within it. Great districts, like your downtown here, are intended to evolve over time. Right? If you got a dentist there one day, the next thing you know, you got a boutique shop. Boutique shop goes away, next thing you know, you got a record store. Then maybe it's a first floor flat that somebody's living in. So it just evolves over time, and that's really how we wanted to see this district evolve over time as well. And it has not been used that way historically, and is not used that way today, but there are pockets of it. Okay, next slide. So we did try to put some idea in terms of how this might come together, in terms of areas to enhance. How do we want to make certain connections? What might be areas to have parks and open space that complement the natural features in this area? So this gets a little bit more detailed in terms of the vision. And you'll notice, some of the bigger moves here are really to treat the north, south, east, west connections, which are that pink color on your screen. And I'll show you some of those ideas here as we go to the next slide. But this is taking that pink and kind of distilling it down. Again, supported with character imagery of how we like to see that district evolve based on that mixed use land use designation. And so I talked about those connections, right? So we have this connection from downtown kind of moving into the Southtown district. And right now it's kind of disjointed. We have the railroad tracks. There's kind of a break in the streetscape. There is no real sense of I'm moving from one district into the next place. And we wanted to enhance the pedestrian safety and comfort. That was very important. You also see that, I'll go back one slide. We were doing really well. And now we got our rhythm back. Okay. You also see that east-west connection through the alley there. That's by the automotive uses there. So the intention there is to really create that strong east-west connection through the district that can be used for motorized and non-motorized connections. Trying to treat it differently, so it says if you are there in it with a car, this is a place you're supposed to drive slow. This is a pedestrian zone. And then it could also be closed off at times. So the way that is used right now, there are times of day when it might make sense and easier for those businesses. We might not be impeding them as much during certain hours if we closed it down. Now you have a big pedestrian promenade that could be the backbone of the district. That also dead ends right into the Farmers Exchange. And so we gave that a very close look. That's a place that's evolving. We had your first blush of that being redeveloped, and now the question is well, what's next, and how does it really help anchor this district? And so we looked at ways to add additional parking in there, but also move pedestrians safely through. What happens right now is if you're coming into that place, you kind of, as a pedestrian, you get dumped onto a parking lot with a lot of points of conflict. That's not something we want to see moving forward. We want to create safe zones for pedestrians, make it clear how they're supposed to move through that space. Okay, next slide. Again, just some character imagery of the streetscape, of the pedestrian connection, the alley connection, the gateway. If you guys have been to Worcester, that's a great, branding element that we also thought could work in this district. Doesn't have to be an arch. In fact, we actually had pylons that we came up with. Next slide. And then this is over kind of an aerial view of the Farmers Exchange, kind of looking at a new configuration here. Yes, this has property acquisition as part of it, but you don't do great planning sometimes without making, big moves. This isn't a place that, as we studied it, there is, we can gain 4 parking spots here and this is all going to work. Ultimately, if Southtown is going to evolve and there's going to continue to be excitement there, entertainment there, parking, as far as we can see in our crystal ball, still a necessary component of planning. And so this was a way that we tried to create parking for the district, not for Farmers Exchange, not for one particular use, but kind of create one central location. And then you'll see kind of moving through the center there's that trail connection that goes right through the heart of it, that kind of bisects the parking area and the Farmers Exchange, which is now kind of envisioned more as a plaza space. Next slide. And then just another view kind of looking in. The important thing is there where it says trail connector moving through. Again, now you see you have a really strong east-west connector through this district. And it's a great anchor. And then we add a little bit more public space out in front of Farmers Exchange. Every time I've come there's always people either collecting turkeys, giving tours, selling something out there. It's a very active place. And it can be a very intentional public space on that side of town as well. Just another view of that. So we have a couple of different options and looks in. Again, this is all visionary. This is not something that's final design. We're just trying to illustrate the intent for this particular focus area. And another look. Lots of looks at this one. And keep going. Okay, this is a great place to pause. As you come into the district, I talked about the arch. You don't necessarily have to have an arch. But how do you brand the district? How do you create this sense of place and identity to it? So it is more of its own place and district within your community. So we came up with a couple of different options on how to do that. There wasn't a lot of interest and love for putting an arch over this roadway for a number of reasons. One of those was safety. And so we found different ways to kind of bring in the spirit of the district, which is a little bit more industrial. You kind of see that open beam trellis structure in the design of the gateway feature. And you can also see how we're trying to treat that streetscape so it's a little bit more complete, safe, comfortable as you come into the place. Next slide. And then we did just another option. So I think we actually got a lot of support from the committee while we're being visionary here. Some folks really grabbed onto this one, excuse me, in terms of how it complemented the Farmers Exchange, the history of the district with the design of that. So that is over a year of work in 20 minutes, and I made one mistake by having the wrong focus area, so please forgive me for that. I do know what they are. What I wanted to do was give you a good lay of the land in terms of what did we do, why did we do it, what did we give you, and how are you intended to use it? How is your community engaged in that process? And then some of the really important nuts and bolts mechanics of this, which are your future land use map, the objectives and strategies within each chapter that have identified parties and timeframes on them. That should be informing your capital improvement planning. And then some of the finer grain stuff that folks like Andrew and Kimberly and others are going to work on as they continue to grow and guide development and economic development in your community. So that's certainly not a comprehensive view of the comprehensive plan, but it's comprehensive enough in 20 minutes or so. So I'm happy to answer any questions you may have for me as we move into the next part of the presentation.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that presentation. That was very thorough. I have just 2 questions. Just trying to figure out how the overlay district that we've adopted on council how'd you integrate that, or how is that impacted by your different districts, if at all? And how does the strategic plan that we have in the city mold into this comprehensive plan?
The overlay districts is a great tool, but it's not going to address all of these districts. I mean, these districts are going to need this surgical approach to zoning in some cases. And I imagine there are going to be certain developers that come in, him or her, that want to develop some of these as PUDs, not straight under the overlay. And zoning's not constant. Overlays are great tools, and they provide more flexibility and help with some of the standards. But these are all very unique places, and they're going to need a unique approach with them over time. So I would imagine one of the next steps that you're going to be looking at is, do they need tweaks to that overlay? Do they need their individual overlays, which is probably what is going to happen next? And I would encourage the staff, we've talked about this, to move into that relatively quickly, because you guys want to continue to see growth and development and generate revenue for the city. Best way to do that is to make places, development ready on the street. Your second comment was about your strategic plan. That wasn't necessarily something we spent a lot of time looking at, to be frank. We're really focused on the downtown plan, the old plan, and the strategic plan. While we were mindful of it, we had members of council on our committee. We were also taking a step back and trying to look at things new and differently. And the strategic plan is intended to guide a lot of the components internally to the city, not externally what we're communicating out to the private sector. So hopefully that answers your question.
Good. Any council member have any questions or comments?
Nice job.
Bill?
One thing I got to say is a lot of the things that we do aren't probably, we wouldn't put the word fun with. But, when you can look ahead 10 years and think about planning for the future, we generally don't do it, even though everything you do every day sort of contributes to the future. It was really thrilling to have the opportunity, I think, to finally, get this plan underway. Councilman Rose and I think, were on the selection committee when we picked OHM because we worked with them before. And we had the opportunity to work with the administration as well as a really good cross-section of the community to address all the areas that Aaron just talked about, and then have them distilled down, packaged up in such a meaningful way. I think it's important for City Council to remember as we go forward that we've done comprehensive plans in the past, and frequently a lot of time and energy is put into the plan by people on council, administration, and the community, but then we don't take the time always to look at it. And I think the suggestion, Aaron, that you made when we look at certain things, we should get the comprehensive plan out. And I think it's important for City Council to agree that once or twice a year at a minimum, we ought to just take a look at the plan formally and see if there's areas that we intend to deal with or we have issues with, and if we need to look at the comprehensive plan to see where the plan was suggesting that we might go. But it was a great exercise, I think, in taking a look ahead, knowing that we've got good people in the administration and participation from the community when this was put together. Great relationship with OHM to get this kind of a quality product. So I appreciate the presentation. Thank you.
Any other members of council have any questions or comments? Paul?
Thank you, Mr. President. Art?
Aaron.
Aaron, okay. I will never get you two squared away.
Yeah, two A's.
The part that I liked the best about this exercise was the number of people we were in the community we were able to speak with, the number of people in the community that we were able to work with here, especially the high school kids. There were 3 high school kids who really contributed from their perspective, and their input was taken as we moved this plan forward. So that I think was probably the most refreshing part of it. It wasn't just a bunch of gray-haired old guys saying this is what we're going to do.
Yeah.
Okay, so it was good. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? And to follow up what Bill said, I think that when we do these processes and council and administration work together, we actually implement things. So that's the goal, right? We don't want to spend all this money just to put it on the shelf, and we go ahead and try to move forward and do things for the city that'll benefit long-term. And I think we've been trying to do that and have done that. And this is going to be a great help for that.
You did a great job with the downtown plan.
Yep.
A number of things in there were achieved, and you walk around town and you can see them all complete. So kudos to you guys.
Yeah, no, I think that's very important because some communities, they just say, yeah, we'll do it, and nothing ever happens. So I think that's a testament, at least to, the administration working towards that goal and getting the plans and getting the community input with respect to all the different things that we need to do in our city to make it more livable. And I think that's what we achieved, so that's good. Anything else? So I think we need a resolution to approve and adopt the plan.
I was going to say to you, John, before I make that motion, I did want to say that the Planning Commission has already reviewed this too and sent it anonymously, unanimous approval, but I'll make a motion to accept the comprehensive plan.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you
Good
for the
luck.
input. Okay, we're moving on to 22-161, which is the amend section 50511, hunting prohibited. The history of this, as you know, we had, I guess it started out a special legislation committee. The discussion morphed between calling and non-calling for a while. It started out with feeding the wild animals, and there was a lot of discussion that came about, which was good input we had. We ended before summer break, we discussed it, and I think it was 6-1 that we wanted to move forward with a calling program. And we didn't vote on that, of course, we just took a poll, and then the mayor took it back, and everybody was supposed to discuss it amongst the residents in their districts or their wards and the city, and provide any other input that they wanted to provide with respect to the proposed ordinance. And I think either Mayor or Jansen, I think, you have some additional changes to that or updates, or do you want to add to that, or Mr. Huber was involved, or whoever wants to give us an update?
Thank you, Mr. President. The two requests that we reviewed and added into the rules and regulations were that in order to participate in the program, you had to be at least 21 years old or older. And then in addition to that, the hunter must provide proof of 5 years of experience or proof of at least 5 deer harvests. And that information can be gathered off of your own account through the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. When you go and purchase your license online, you can log in and pull up and get the date of your hunter education. If you're out of state and have an out-of-state hunter education course, we can also require proof of at least 5 deer harvests. That was at the request of council, and everything else as far as rules and regulations goes remains the same.
Okay. Does anybody on council have any comments or questions regarding the proposed legislation that we talked about last time and was updated through the process, or any observations? Anybody? Mr. Simpson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. During our recess, I have had the ability to speak with and correspond with several residents, both for and against the calling program. The consensus that I've reached through even the people that are in favor of the calling is that they would not support calling any of our neighborhoods, and I've always agreed with that. So I would like to amend the request to state that if there is going to be, if this passes this body, that the hunting only be permitted or give permits by the police department for properties that back up either to a park or a wooded area that can be secured properly. No, and I don't think any of our attention was having hunting in neighborhoods. That was never any of our attentions. And would also like to follow Mr. Lamb's request of pursuing a non-lethal. And again, I think this is just going to be a first step. It'll be a trial period for us. It's going to put a lot of burden on the police department and the administration, the service department, and so forth. But that'd be my only amendment, was just to make sure that it's properties that are not going to be directed to any neighborhoods in the city. It would be directed, the hunt would be directed towards the parks or a secured wooded area. Thank you.
Let's take other comments, and then I guess you can make the motion if you want to do an amendment. And
Okay.
see what happens. Anybody else? Jim, Paul, Bill? Bill?
I think I've made clear a number of times my opposition to what's currently proposed. And I've got to tell you, Denny, I appreciate your approach to trying to rope this in so that it isn't, because we don't have anything in this ordinance that says where this would take place or how much space there would be. There has to be. Many municipalities that have urban hunts, they specify the size. It has to be 3 acres, it has to be 5 acres. But we don't have any of that. So within what we're going to do, there is nothing specific to that. My concern, I guess, about that would simply be when the representative from the Department of Natural Resources came to the first special legislation meeting, he made very clear and he seems to be, the Department of Natural Resources really seems to be part of the engine behind this. He made clear that, to paraphrase, but I think it's a pretty direct quote, that as long as you could put together 10 lots, he said, if 10 people in your neighborhood could get together, that would work. He said that would work, and that's pretty specific. And so now to say, well, we wouldn't do that, it seems to me that we are putting this together piecemeal. I appreciate the changes that the Parks Director mentioned a few minutes ago. 12 years old with an adult who does not hold a license, having the ability to hunt for 3 months in the city on any property that's designated seemed to me to be relatively outrageous. The fact that you have to be experienced, I think, was an issue that we brought up because, truthfully, I think most people that hunt know pretty darn well that no experienced hunter, no real hunter, is going to apply to do this where you can stand 12 feet away and shoot the deer. That's probably not going to happen. But I think that the change that says you'd have to demonstrate that you have experience is important because it's like everything we do. Somebody with the most experience is probably going to be the most reliable person that's not going to make a mistake and shoot the arrow 5,000 feet. Kind of like a truck driver on the freeway, I guess. You always hope that that's somebody that's got some experience. But that aside, my sense is that we're obligated, this board that we're on is obligated to make decisions that are absolutely based on reason, on quantifiable and accurate information. And those decisions are the things that will most likely have positive outcomes. In my experience with this board and with the administration is we have always worked really hard to be specific, to be reasonable in what we do. We're not even relatively, we are conservative in what we do. What we do with the budget, what we do when we're concerned about liability. I mean, there are a number of things that we have considered, we have proposed, and then we shelve them simply over the question of liability. But the urban hunt is not reasonable. It's not a nuanced plan. But the urban hunt, the way this is put together, is simply a reaction. It is basically a copy and paste proposal that's disguised as an answer to this question, this cry of do something. We've heard that statement, do something. But if we pass this proposal, it may make us feel good. It may give us a talking point that we did something, that we dealt with the deer issue. We could feel that way. But the proposal doesn't in any way resolve constituent concerns about deer issues. Not about numbers, not about plants, not about traffic. What is being proposed is on the surface a quick fix, which is at best a very short-term fix, is inhumane, and it's ineffective. Ultimately, it won't change anything. We are a built-out community with acres of wooded parkland, surrounded by townships with fields and forests. We have very little space that you could consider, you could consider large enough, safe enough to serve as a 3-month hunting ground. So even if you could lure 30 hunters, considering as you just pointed out, Denny, the limited space that we could use, if you could get 30 hunters that were qualified and met the requirements that the Parks Director just talked about, if you could get them to participate in this hunt, and I believe you can kill 1 buck, 2 does. You have three deer. Is that correct? 1 buck and 3 does. That's 90 deer. And if the figure is correct, there are currently 600 deer. So even if you could kill the deer, those deer will be replaced in the spring, and they'll be replaced by deer in surrounding areas. And in the end, nothing will change. Because 500 deer, it only takes 1 deer to do what the issues are that we have heard frequently now, which many of them are damage to residential property. So let's be clear. To get this hunt started, we partnered with ODNR, whose only answer to deer management is one thing, and that one thing is culling. They're in business to sell hunting licenses and to keep the deer population in the state at a level that serves that purpose, to sell hunting licenses. They offer no help with humane control, no methods including immunocontraception or other birth control methods. Their only answer is culling, and the purpose is to sell hunting licenses. In the past 10 years, there's been no request, not one. In the past 10 years, there's been no request for council action proposing any form of deer culling. If there are 600 deer in Medina today, if there are 600 deer in Medina this year, there would have been near that number the year before, and the year before that. And the deer traffic data that we have that you can quantify indicates that it has been a progressive 500, 550, maybe 600. Yet no culling or hunt request ever came from council. No request came from the president of council. No request came from the Parks Director. No request came from the administration. So think about it. The deer population did not just occur this year. So what is it that drives the urgency to act and not any urgency the year before or the year before that? It wasn't until I scheduled 3 special legislation committee meetings over a period of 4 months, and they were specifically to address feeding wild animals. It was an ordinance we had worked on the year before last. It had been tabled because the administration in feeding wild animals wanted to include, and we accepted, cats and dogs. So the law director and I had worked again on that ordinance, trying to amend the language to make it not too intrusive. And that was what was in the special legislation committee meeting the first time. Over the period of those 3 meetings, it became clear from constituents that attended that they felt there was an issue with deer, and the discussion of how to manage the deer came up. And that was when I proposed that we adopt a non-lethal method based on the comprehensive planning from the Humane Society that we could use as a template, not to do a quick fix, not to do something that makes us feel good but won't work, but to do something that would be a bit of work, take us a while to get in place. It would necessitate a great deal of community involvement and participation, but it wouldn't be relying on numbers of deer. It would be relying on how do you address the issues and concerns of problems that the deer cause. And those things can all be addressed, and they can be addressed in a non-lethal way, without violence, without considering having a hunt that was made clear in the beginning could well be in a neighborhood, but it could be done in a humane way. That plan was approved out of special legislation, but it is not here and it has not been brought to this board because what was brought to the board was the lethal plan that we got during the midst of those special legislation committee meetings. So we have the lethal plan now, but we don't really have the plan that, the suggestion that I had of the work we needed to do to create our own plan using the Humane Society plan as a guideline. So looking out at the group of you here, I know a lot of you. I know a lot of folks here, and I know we have a difference of opinion. I know what the concerns are because I sat through 3 meetings that were ultimately an absolute waste of my time, the committee's time, and the public's time who participated because the result of that committee meeting absolutely meant nothing because it was rejected, and we are here today to look at the lethal plan. I understand your concerns, and I understand that we have a difference of opinion. I also understand that we all live in the same community, and it's important that we all work to get along, and we all work to address it in a way that will be effective and will have a result that's positive, because that's what this city council and this administration has always done. Not just jump at something that you can copy and paste, put together, change almost every time we sit down together, and then put that out to the community and to put it to us and ask us to vote on it. So I would propose tonight that looking at the outpouring of opinions, the outpouring of folks that have showed up, that this is an issue that cries to go on the ballot. This is something that should go on the ballot. And lastly, understand that I have worked with the administration for years, been at City Hall for many years, worked with my colleagues on City Council. We have a difference of opinion. We still will work together. We will always work together for what's best for the community. We have a disagreement in some form, but we will continue to work as we always have for the best interest of the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Mayor Hamel, do you have anything to add? Mr. Huber, do you have anything to add?
This proposal is before the council as a result of the council's previous vote to consider it, and it's subject to change. This council can choose to not pick this up at this time if you want to. You can choose to go forward if you want to. It'll be a decision based upon your collective vote, and the majority will carry the day. This proposal can be changed if we need to amend it to reflect what Denny talked about. We can do that. We don't need to rush this, I don't imagine. And if we need to adjust it, we can, or the council can move forward and table this for the time being. It's your call. I don't think there's any intent on the part of the administration to rush anything with respect to this issue.
Thank you. I guess from a council's perspective, Denny has an amendment, but I think we need to vote on the ordinance first before we can amend it. You can't amend something that, if it fails, there's nothing to amend. If it passes, then you can amend it. So I guess, trying to figure out what people want to do is, does anybody want to put a motion to approve the amendment to section 50511, hunting prohibited? Is there a motion to approve it as modified by the administration?
Oh, as it came.
Right, yeah. Is there?
I'll make that motion.
Right.
I'll move to.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is all in favor to approve the motion? Say aye.
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 All opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries 6-1. Now, I guess, is there a motion to amend the ordinance as approved with Denny's restriction to limit it to, did you say just all the parks? Is that?
Well, properties, there should be no hunting on properties other than that abut wooded areas or parks initially as a trial period for the city. Because, again, those properties are going to have to be secured by the police department or approved by the police department. And you know, I don't think a single small lot is, am I wrong, Chief? You're not going to, probably not going to approve a single lot that backs up to a wood. It would have to be addressed in a larger,
Yeah, each request would be vetted individually.
okay.
So your motion would be to amend the ordinance that was just passed to limit it to just parks in the city and properties that are adjacent to parks.
Correct.
Okay, is there a second on that motion? Is there a second on that motion? Is there a second on that motion? Hearing none, the motion fails. So I guess, we stick with the past ordinance as submitted regarding the amending section 50511, hunting prohibited. And there will be, the next step would be moving to council in 2 weeks for approval by full council, since finance passed at 6-1. So that's that one. Okay, thank you. Thank you for all the input that we had in making this tough decision. Moving on to number 4 is 22163, CHIP grant rehab at 412 West Washington Street. Okay, I'm sorry. What just happened is we passed the calling ordinance, and we're moving forward to council to adopt it by council in 2 weeks. We're adopting the plan that was submitted, that we just heard from Mr. Worley. So we are allowing calling in the city pursuant to the ordinance that was drafted and submitted to council by the administration. That's what's happening. Using bows and arrows. That is correct. That passed. So thank you. Yes. Well, thank you. Okay, moving on to 22163, CHIP grant rehab, 412 West Washington Street. Mrs. Marshall?
No.
Mrs. Marshall? Oh, Mr. Zur, go ahead.
Thank you,
Go ahead, Mr.
Mr. President. You have before you 4 requests for contractor contacts, 2 for the CHIP grant, 2 for the Target of Opportunity grant. It was just a matter of timing. They came to us right before you went on break, so they didn't get on your agenda. So we're asking that they be approved with the emergency clause. Both of the projects are underway, and it's one contractor.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Deser, I cannot hear you.
Yeah, could you, we're conducting the meeting here. I mean, if you'd like to leave, you can leave at this time, but you can't disrupt the public meeting. So I appreciate it. If you disrupt it, I'll have to ask you to leave. So Barbara, go ahead again, I'm sorry.
Okay. The 2 contracts for the CHIP grant are with the same contractor. So these are rehab projects, very large projects. So he has a lot of money wrapped up in them.
Right.
And we'd like to get them approved with the emergency clause.
So you're talking not only this current 22163, but 22164.
And 164
You want to do
also.
that? Okay, is there a motion for 22163?
Move to approve with the emergency clause?
Second, including the emergency clause?
Any further discussion on that one? All in favor with the emergency clause?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. And then we have 22164, the CHIP grant rehab for 30 Circle Drive. This is the other one you were mentioning about?
Yes.
Okay, is there a
Move to
motion?
approve with the emergency clause?
Second, including the emergency clause?
Any further discussion on 30 Circle Drive, CHIP grant? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. 22165, Target of Opportunity Grant Contract with AM Plumbing BWS. Is this you, Barbara?
Yes. Target of Opportunity grant is for the battered women's shelter. These are very large contracts, and we'd like to get them passed with the emergency clause.
And this is with the county, correct?
Yeah, well, this is our part of it, yes. Yes, so there's federal money, state money, grants,
Okay.
but these are our 2. We'll have one more eventually for cupboards and flooring. But these 2, they'd like these people to be able to move ahead. They bid on these contracts, and the longer they have to wait, the higher the prices are going.
I got you.
So that, again, we'd like these with the emergency clause, so these folks can go ahead and get
And this is
them.
the, all right, is there any further discussion on this one?
I move to approve with the emergency clause?
Second, including the emergency clause?
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. And then the Target Opportunity Grant contract with Calvary Mechanical. This is the same thing you were just talking
Same.
about.
Same thing.
Move to approve with the
Yeah.
emergency clause.
Second, including emergency clause?
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. 22-167, a transfer to the general fund to the police fund. Keith?
Thank you, Mr. President. This is in relation to the grant from a couple of years ago. The expenditures for the court administrators' salaries and benefits were not acceptably documented, so they asked us to reallocate those expenditures to the police salaries, which were allowable, and in order to facilitate that, we need to reimburse the police fund for that amount.
Any further discussion on that?
Move to approve.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. 22-168, we have budget amendments. First one, we have 2022-20 reimbursement to the police department. Keith, you doing this one?
Well, it's a reimbursement. It needs appropriated in order to be spent, which it already was, but
Okay.
Move to approve.
Second?
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Next one we have is 22-021 for the police,
just for a camera.
for a camera. Okay.
Move to approve.
Second?
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. 2022-22 salaries for South Prospect ARPA. Keith?
All of these are transfers within the fund. There's no overall increase or decrease. It's just matching up with what we're spending.
And this is from the grant that we received.
Part of it's for state highway salaries, but, yeah, and then there's the grant.
Okay. And
Move to approve.
Second?
any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. 2022-23 miscellaneous. Keith?
There's a lot of things here because it's been all summer. This is closing balances and so on.
Okay.
Move to approve.
Second?
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. 22-169 to transfer to the general fund of the railroad fund. Keith?
We hadn't done this for a few years, but we're going back to it. The agreement with the railroad customers is it's $10,000 a year, and each of the customers pays that, and then the city pays an equal amount, and so this is our share.
All right. Any discussion?
Move to approve.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. 22-170, a transfer for MCRC operating to the MCRC capital fund. Keith?
This is in accordance with the joint operating agreement on the rec center.
Any further discussion on the transfer?
Mr. Coyne,
Yes.
since it involves my employer, I'm going to abstain on this one.
Move to approve?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions?
Aye.
Motion carries. 22-171, a transfer to the general fund of the parking fund. Keith?
This is a transfer. The parking fund does not have enough revenues to pay for its operations, so we periodically have to transfer money from general to cover it.
Okay, questions?
Move to approve.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. 22-172, advance from the general fund to the airport funds.
This is covering grant projects for the airport.
Okay,
Move to approve.
Second?
any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. 22-173 is an advance from the street stormwater to grant fund South Prospect. Keith?
This is another grant. It's for that South Prospect project. It will be repaid once we get the grant funds.
Okay, any further discussion?
Move to approve.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. 22-174, establish a new fund for special projects, One Ohio Opioid Settlement Fund. Keith?
Ordinarily, when we create a new fund, we are required to request of the state auditors that we be permitted to. In this case, the state is requiring us that we create this, so they already sent out a thing that we don't have to ask. We can just go ahead and do it, but we still have to go through the formality of council creating the fund.
Any questions?
Move to approve.
Second?
All in favor?
I'm sorry, I have a question.
Oh, sorry.
I'm actually have been asked to be on the One Ohio that decides where the money goes. Am I allowed to vote on this?
I think that might be a conflict, so you have to abstain.
Okay, abstain.
Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions?
Aye.
Motion carries. 16-22-175, job creation grant payment for Carlisle Brake and Friction. Mrs. Marshall?
Thank you, Mr. President. This request is to authorize a job creation grant payment to the Carlisle Brake and Friction Company, known as Friction Products, for tax year 2021 in the amount of $51,750.06 for 2 job creation grants. The numbers break out to job creation grant number 13 was the project in 2017. That amount is $18,750.06. The second grant is Job Creation Grant 21 for the project that occurred in 2020 in the amount of $33,000. These grants are a result of 2 expansion projects. The first one was for their warehouse production, employee welfare areas, and machinery and equipment investments. The second one was for the relocation of the Solon headquarters to Medina. The company has exceeded their goals. All of the information has been reviewed and by Rita. The company is doing well. However, like all companies, they are still having challenges with supply chain and hiring and continue to work through all of those issues. We are respectfully requesting council to authorize the job creation grant payment. As a reminder to council and public that all of the funding for these grants comes from non-income tax generated revenues. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion or comment on the job creation grant for Carlisle?
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. 22-176, we have adjustments to the purchase orders and budgets due to fuel cost. Keith, is there a fuel cost problem out there?
There is, and I had mentioned before the summer that we in finance would do this rather than having an individual department heads. You can see there's obviously a lot of departments that buy fuel. Fuel costs have drawn back a little bit from their peak, but they're still considerably over what they were when we did budgets. This is our estimate of what's needed to get through the rest of the year. Some of these adjustments we had to make through Board of Control already because we actually ran out already. But there's some budget adjustments in here. I want to make sure you are on board, and then we'll put the budget amendment through for next time.
No, we appreciate it. I think as we did a few of the budgets already this year.
An emergency clause, sorry, the Mayor pointed out, the emergency clause is requested because we're already out of money on some of these lines, so.
We as council as a whole agreed that, fuel cost is not something that the department head can have that much control over, so we are agreeable that I think during the budgeting process, whatever the fuel cost was in your particular department, the budget would be increased to reflect those additional expenditures, and it wouldn't be held against the department head through other accounts based upon just because there's a higher fuel cost. And I know the department heads like that a little bit. They'd rather have the money to pay for the fuel, so. All right, any other questions?
Move to approve with the emergency clause.
I do have one question.
Wait, you got to second it. Wait,
Does this-
wait.
He had a question.
I know, but you got to second it first.
Second.
Okay, Paul?
Okay. All right. Keith, these increases, how much of a buffer are you putting in these to take into account oil increases later in the year, because it's going to happen?
Yeah, well, we were concerned about that too, because our problem is if we run out of money in December, then it's hard to get things paid. We looked at the first 6 months of the year, and then we added, I think it was 20% is what we added to that to get through the last 6 months of the year. And prices have come off a little bit, so we think that's going to be enough, but, we'll keep an eye on it. Okay. I mean, if we're getting short in October, obviously I want to come back in November and have some more added in so that because we don't want to run out in December and not be able to pay the bill.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on that? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. 22-177, it's an increase of a PO 22-517 for Davis Tree Farm for the forestry. Mr. Worley?
Thank you, Mr. President. This is to increase our existing PO by $10,000, making the total not to exceed $25,000 so we can tag trees for our fall tree planting. Thank you.
Questions?
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. 22-178, amend planning and zoning code sections 113702 and 113704. Mr. Dutt?
Thank you. These are amendments 113702 and 113704, which are permitted and conditionally permitted uses in the C3 general commercial zoning district. That's generally our newer commercial areas, North Court, north of Harding, Worcester Pike or Route 3 on the south side of town, and commercial around the fairground area. So specifically, this removes wholesale establishments from permitted use in the C3 district and moves them to conditional use when less than 10,000 square feet in area. So a conditional use will require a public hearing and review by the Planning Commission. The reason for the amendment is a large-scale wholesale establishment is similar to a distribution center or warehousing, and is not really appropriate for a commercial area. It's more appropriate for an industrial area where it is currently permitted. At this time, we have one wholesale establishment in the C3, and it's a small wine wholesaler at about 2,000 square feet. Thanks.
Thank you. Do we expect any issues? I mean, I guess the question is, I mean, we're making this modification now, and I only can imagine one wholesaler that would most likely come in, but they usually go by highways. So I wasn't sure.
It's to prevent any future usage of a large-scale wholesaler coming into an available building.
Unless they get approval through the planning commission.
Well, it could not be a large building in this case.
Period.
Yeah.
Okay. I got that. Any questions on that?
And just reiterate, the planning commission did pass this unanimously.
Okay. Any other questions?
Move to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. 22-179, increase PO 22-684, Epic Aviation.
This is fuel. This one, unlike the others, doesn't actually cost us any money at the bottom line because the fuel that we buy at the airport is for resale. So when the price goes up, we pay more, we charge more, it all comes out in the wash. But we were already out. We buy fuel here in 6,000 gallon increments, so when we're out, we need a lot of money.
Yeah, sounds like that. Any other
Yes,
questions?
and the emergency clause is requested because we're already out of money and we need to fill this.
Nope.
Move to approve with the emergency clause?
Second, including the emergency clause.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. 22-180, increase PO 22-594, Pradco for the police department. Chief Kenny?
Thank you, Mr. President. This is an increase in our Pradco PO. It's for the psychological examinations for new hires.
Thank you. Any questions?
Move to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. 22-181, job creation grant payment for Sandridge Food Corp. Mrs. Marshall?
Thank you, Mr. President. This request is to authorize a job creation grant payment to Sandridge Food Corporation for tax year ending 2021 in the amount of $36,875 for 2 job creation grants as follows. The first one is job creation grant number 4 for a project in 2012 in the amount of $22,500, and job creation grant number 12 for a project that occurred in 2017 in the amount of $14,375. These were both expansion projects in their warehouse production and employee welfare areas, as well as investments in machinery and equipment. The company has been working hard to fulfill their hiring and payroll commitments. They've implemented hiring bonuses, referral bonuses, and have increased their payroll for bargaining unit employees. The company is also considering additional projects and expansion plans at this time. The information has been verified by RITA, and we are respectfully requesting council to authorize this job creation grant payment. And as a final reminder to council and the public, that funding comes from non-income tax generated revenues. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions or comment on the job creation grant?
Mr. President,
Reggie?
as this is my employer, I need to abstain from this vote. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments or questions?
Move to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions?
Aye.
Motion carries. 22-182, grant application for Ohio Criminal Justice Services for Nomini Court. Cindy?
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a grant that we are going to be applying for. It directly affected during the COVID. Case log, we were doing graded. It's the warrants that we were unable to activate on. Usually we send bailiffs out there to inform those defendants that have an open warrant that you have a warrant, you need to come to court, or we can try picking up. Right now we have about 639 that we have open. This grant will allow 4 bailiffs and about 2 deputy clerks. It'll fund those salaries as it considers overtime.
Thank you. Any further question or comment on the grant?
Move to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. 22-183, ARPA funds for the fire station number 1, the HVAC. Chief? This you?
So we had to replace the heating and cooling system, one of the commercial units at Fire Station Number 1, and we did have the attorneys that manage the ARPA funds look and confirm that those were approved for it. And since that was not part of my budget this year, that was good news.
That is good news. Any other questions?
Move to approve.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. 22-184, deer hunting program for Mr. Lamb. Mr. Lamb?
So I presume this is what I looked at, we're talking about my request for liability, correct?
Correct, that's correct.
Okay. So I had turned in a request to City Council based on the, not on the assumption, but at the, each council person here, with the exception of me, I think, has spoken publicly that they feel that the urban hunting is safe. And my concern is that it may be to a degree safe, but if it was really safe, we could assume the liability if we really believe it is safe. My thinking is, let's say nobody actually gets physically hurt, but if you got an arrow stuck in the side of your house or go through your window, arrows are not like bullets. I mean, there's no signature on an arrow. Whose arrow is it? So who's going to pay for that damage? And the person that would be the homeowner, any kind of damage that occurred, and most people that are homeowners have a deductible. So you would have to pay for that out of pocket. If you have people hunting for 3 months, from 30 minutes before sunup to 30 minutes after sundown, and nobody actually knows when they're hunting, but we would know where by the ordinance that you just passed, because you would be designating the property. But the arrow could inadvertently certainly go someplace that is not where it's supposed to go. Or if the deer is shot and runs out in the road with your arrow in it and then hits a car, or if the deer lands in somebody's front yard on an errant arrow and your child comes out and steps on it because the blades of the arrow are razor sharp, you're going to take the child to the hospital maybe to get stitches. Who will pay for that, because you don't know whose arrow it is. So if in fact I were to sit here and say, here is a program for you, community, and it is safe, but I will not assume any liability for anything that happens, I would certainly doubt that maybe that was a safe program. So my proposal is that we as a city, if in fact we are going to go forward with this, as has been indicated by the vast majority of us, then we should at least at minimum assume liability.
Council comments, Mr. Simpson?
Bill, I have a question. I mean, I totally understand what you're saying. In fact, I just had a resident call me. It wasn't somebody hunting, but one of her neighbors was doing target practicing with a crossbow in their backyard, a block over, and she found an arrow in her roof. So, I mean, I understand, and she called her insurance company, and she had to pay her deductible. I don't think she called the police about it. I told her that she should, but I don't think she said she talked to the neighbor, and but anyhow, how is this going to differ that we recognize there's a problem? You've attended all the ward meetings that I've attended over the last several years, and the main topic was, what are we going to do about the deer, and we've done nothing. How is this going to differ for the people that have already hit the deer with their car? Knock on wood, there really hasn't been any reported injuries, but should we be paying the deductible on their vehicles because we recognize there's a problem, we've done nothing about it?
No, because I don't think it's I actually, with all due respect, Danny, I don't think it's a credible analogy, because the deer are wild, right? And secondly, I guess to say that we've done nothing about it is relatively true, but not entirely true. What we have not done about it, which is the nothing we have done about it, is we have heard you must do something, but nobody here, nobody in the administration, nobody on city council, for what you just said. We heard from people at meetings that there was an issue, but nobody turned in a request for council action to do anything about it until I held the special legislation meetings last spring, and I came up with the non-lethal solution. Then we suddenly came back with the lethal one. We did not do anything because no one turned in a request. The Parks Director did, because he put together a comprehensive, what he felt was a comprehensive program, which was all we could do based on the people that were available to try to address issues. But we never really put together a comprehensive program that had legs, that was on the ground where we could really work. So as a wild animal runs out into the street and you hit it, okay, but if we say, this is our hunting program, you meet the requirements, you can go hunt on this designated piece of property, and you are hunting on that designated piece of property. You shoot the animal, and the animal is not there for you to deal with because the animal took off and ran into a car and it's got your arrow in it. I think that's different than if an animal simply runs out into the street.
Well,
I think what we have to look at is the fact that we're saying this is safe. This is safe. Don't worry about it. The mayor indicated for years that he would never do culling in the city because it wasn't safe, and he qualified that by saying what he said a few months ago. What he meant was in the parks. He would never do it in the parks because you could never really be certain no one's in that park. Let it be a child, an animal, or maybe one of the many homeless people that are living in our parks that you don't see unless you want to wander in at night and see who is living there. So now we have had a suggestion of an amendment that we could shoot into the parks. But we know we can't because we know it's not safe. So we're saying that this program, however it plays out, we don't know what size the lot is, we don't know where they are. It's all kind of up to the police chief, I guess, where they'll be, that it is safe. So if it's that safe, we should assume the liability. I spoke with our former police chief, whose father was a police chief, and whose cousin was a Speaker of the Ohio House. And he said he would never, ever approve this program.
I got a couple of questions. I mean, Bill, you know I respect you. I mean, I respect the hell out of you. And I respect what you've done by getting this group of people together. I truly do. But two things. I think it's unfair. I think it's unfair.
Quiet, please. Quiet.
I think it's unfair to say that we've, as a body, have not done anything, because when we first started talking about this, the residents first started coming up to us, we did contact the state. We contacted ODNR, and at that time, the cost was prohibitive. I forget what the cost was. We had to have a plane fly over with infrared lights, and it had to be provided by the state, and it was going to be over $100,000. So then in 2016, the mayor asked, I think it was 2016, yes. The mayor asked Jansen to start getting data together, because at that time, before the state was going to issue permits, we had to have a count. So we did do something. I mean, secondly, and again, I'm not disagreeing with anything that you said about the liability, except how do the surrounding townships handle that? If they allow, and they say it's safe to hunt in their neighborhoods or their properties, how do they deal with the liability if that happens to them? If it's a bow hunter and the situations that you responded, are the townships liable? And it's an honest question. I'm not trying to be sarcastic.
No, I don't think you are being sarcastic. I just think, truthfully, I don't really care about how the townships are doing it. What I care about is that we have said this is absolutely safe, even though we don't know where it's going to take place. At this moment, we have no idea. And if we think it's safe, then why would we not assume liability?
Well, I guess that's a question, too, if we think it's safe. I mean, I think the parade is safe, but we have them waive liability. I mean, so should we not have them waive liability? So if somebody gets hurt in the parade, we take full responsibility. So, I mean, there's a lot of arguments. I could think of a lot of them, and Mayor Hanwell has probably a few that he can think about.
Well, the July 4th parade, because it's run by the city, so every participant has to sign a waiver that they'll hold the city harmless. The rec center has all the participants sign a waiver. The sports associations have all the participants sign a waiver. This is no different than what we're doing with all the other things in the city, and the law director and the administration feel that the waiver is best for the city.
Yeah, I think we're charged as council to look out for the best interests of the city with respect to everything, including liability. And since we have all the associations and even parade participants sign a waiver of liability, I don't, and I think it's safe, so I would assume this would be safe, and they would sign a waiver also. Mr. Huber?
Well, this is really not a City of Medina novelty. This is how this kind of activity is handled across the state. In legal terminology, it's considered to be recreational activity across the state of Ohio. And a recreational activity places responsibility upon the person who is actually engaged in the action. So on a soccer field, we provide the field, but the person who's actually the actor, which is a soccer player, signs a waiver taking responsibility for himself, and that applies in all of the sports activities and would apply equally to a hunter, because the actor is a hunter. And in terms of responsibility for damage, the responsibility legally would lie with the actor, which is the hunter, and that person can be found pretty easily in this situation, because these individuals will be securing a permit from the city and will be vetted by the police department. So if there's an event, it'll be a pretty easy matter to trace back who was there, and that person is responsible because they are the actor involved in the activity. So that's not just the City of Medina, that's how the state of Ohio deals with these kinds of recreational activities.
Thank you. Is there any other comments or questions on council regarding that? Yes?
Again, I respectfully disagree, because all the sports activities that were just listed, none of them have a weapon. And I understand the law director, I understand what you're saying, that the person who is the hunter would of course be liable because these are the properties, they're only on these properties. But if the arrow is not on that property and the arrow doesn't have a signature, who knows whose arrow that is? There is no way to really know who shot an arrow if an arrow goes errant, which very likely could happen since they can go 5,000 feet. It's not going to happen while you're playing soccer or playing basketball. And there is no weapon in all those other things that you just named.
Okay. So I guess what you're proposing is, I assume you're going to make a motion to have the city waive its liability with respect to the calling program? Is that your motion?
Yes, it is.
Is there a second for that motion? Motion dies for lack of second. 22-185, 2022 city auction. Mr. Piccoli.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a request to hold our annual auction for no longer needed vehicles and equipment that's usable. The law director has approved the contract with First Quality Auctioneer, and we have a temporary slated schedule for October 22nd of 2022 at the City Garage. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on the auction?
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. 22-186, approve ARPA Fund Project Monarch Carpet 1. Mr. Piccoli.
Thank you, Mr. President. So over the years in the police department, we've had trouble with the sanitary pipes leaking on the first floor, on the main floor, down into the detective bureau, and saturated the carpet with sewage, unfortunately. And we've cleaned it up. We've mitigated it as soon as we became aware of it. We've tried to fix the pipes. Well, we've come to the point where we replaced all the pipes when we did the renovation in the locker room when the chief did that. Likewise, we had a grinder pump fail several times in the basement, and that regurgitated into the mayor's office, resulting in the same. This is a ARPA-approved project. If the council votes, we would like to replace that carpeting in both these areas, specifically for sanitary purposes. Appreciate the consideration. Thank you.
Any further questions or comments?
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. 22-187, increase PO 2022-689, Cocosing Service Department. Mr. Piccoli.
Thank you, Mr. President. We started with a PO in the beginning of the year for $12,000 for asphalt patching materials that we received from Cocosing. To get through the remainder of the year, we'd like to increase this to $22,000 for adding $10,000 to purchase the patching material for the pavement repair. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. 22-188, bids discussion for South Court Curb Replacement Program. Mr. Patton.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a project we do semi-annually where we replace curbs in the city. This year, we're going to recommend that we do a project on South Court Street, starting at Lafayette Street to a point approximately 275 feet south of South Street. One thing I wanted to make sure we discussed, council's clear on, in order to install these curbs, there are a total of 6 trees that will have to be removed, 6 existing trees. In addition to that, we had our forestry department kind of survey the area. They found 3 other trees that they're going to remove regardless of whether or not we go forward with the project. So there'll be 9 trees that will be removed if we go forward with the project. In addition, there's 19 others that are kind of susceptible. Now we've modified our specifications to have a very careful excavation around those trees and installation of the curb to try and protect them. But Jansen and Jesse feel that there is a possibility they may be damaged during construction. We're not going to remove them. Rather, they're going to have either Jansen or Jesse on site while they're being excavated to make the determination at that point. So going forward, we wanted to make sure everyone was clear about that. If council does want to approve this, we will then notify the property owners before we bid the project what the situation is as well.
The question I have is, when you say removal, is there an attempt to replace them, or they cannot be replaced?
They would be replaced with adequate species to be planted on smaller tree lawns. Right now, the existing trees are of a size to where once we do excavation right next to them, we're digging within 1 foot of them, and they pose a greater risk for liability. So with a clean slate, we would identify available planting sites and select trees to be planted underneath overhead conductors.
Okay, good. No, I just wanted to make sure they're going to be replaced. Any other questions?
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. 22-189, loan application for Ohio Public Works Commission. Who's handling this one? Patrick?
Thank you. Council may remember at our last meeting, we did approve, well, it was at Finance Committee, I think it gets approved tonight, the grant application for this Ohio Public Works program. We are, as a district, required to take out a certain number of loans in addition to the grant. Our share of that loan this year would be $120,000. The nice thing about this program is water system projects can easily qualify for the grant program, for the loan program rather than the grant program. So in the past, we've tended to push water projects. $120,000 doesn't go very far, as you might know. I spoke to Andy Conrad, the county engineer, who's our district liaison. There is additional loan funds available. We met as a group and internally, the master plan we do for the water system, we do it about every 5 years. There's some improvements to the water lines around the square that has been at the top of our master plan recommended projects list. That comes to about $510,000. Mr. Conrad did confirm that funding would be available if we wanted to pursue it. So we're going to recommend that we pursue a loan in the amount of $510,000 for the improvement of the water line around the square. You might remember, I think it was 2014, we did replace 3 sides of the square. That was always intended to be our phase 1. Well, this will be phase 2. It'll be West Washington Street, South Elmwood, that sort of thing.
Thank you. Any further questions?
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. 22-190, agreement with the county to operate and maintain the city's sanitary sewer system. Patrick?
Thank you. 50 years ago, almost 50 years ago, the county and the city entered into an agreement where the county operates and maintains our city sanitary sewer system. That agreement expires this December 31st. So for the past several months, myself, our law director, and the mayor have been working with the county to prepare a new agreement, and that's what's before you. It's another 50-year agreement commencing January 1st. It's essentially the same. There's some minor changes to the language, but it's essentially the same as the one we've had for the last 50 years.
Any questions on the agreement?
Has Mr. Huber looked at it?
He helped draft it with the county prosecutor's office.
I have looked at it, and we have had a number of meetings on it. Hopefully this will work.
Thank you. Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. 22-191, amend ordinance 12022, emergency State Route 18 water line extension. Mr. Patton.
As council might remember, before we went on break, we approved an ordinance authorizing an emergency water line extension project in conjunction with the ODOT improvement on State Route 18. At that time, we just had a ballpark estimate as how much the cost would be, since it was a time and material agreement. The final total came to $138,225.30. So we're asking to modify that ordinance to reflect that final amount.
And that'll be coming out of the 108?
That, I believe, is ARPA funds.
Oh, it's all ARPA funds? Yeah, because there's
Yes.
nothing listed on here where it's coming from.
Yeah.
So it's coming from the ARPA funds, okay. Any questions?
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. 22-192, cooperative purchase fitness equipment for the MCRC. Mr. Worley.
Thank you, Mr. President. This request is to purchase predominantly new free weight equipment for our balcony area and a couple pieces of ground floor equipment at the rec center. This is all replacing 20-year-old original equipment through the National Cooperative Purchasing Alliance. We're also requesting to trade in various pieces of equipment that are included on the RCA, totaling $6,200. We had this budgeted through 2021 reappropriated carry forward. I think that's it.
Any other comments?
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. And finally, 22-193, purchase of firefighter turnout gear. Chief Walters?
Thank you, Mr. President. This is part of our ongoing replacement plan for the structural firefighting gear that our firefighters wear. The original request that you have in front of you is for 8 sets. And just like everything else, the prices and the lead time for this gear is going up. That gear is going up 12% next month. And so instead of waiting until next year to get our next round, knowing that we'll have at least 1, if not 2 increases, requesting the committee consider the total changing to $33,660 for 12 sets instead of 8 sets. And in order for the vendor to hold that pricing for us, we would need to include the emergency clause with that.
And you need to add the vendor too, I think.
So the vendor, that's what I gave you a copy of earlier. It's Fire Safety Services.
So Fire Safety Services, Inc. will be the vendor. The modification will be from 22,440 to 33,660, and it'll change from 8 to 12 sets with the emergency clause, and it's coming out of your 107 account. I believe there's plenty of money in there to cover that small
It
increase
is.
of
We'll be
11,000.
using carry forward for it.
Carry forward for
Yes,
that.
sir.
I like the way you talk. That's good.
Mr. Coyne, I have a question.
Yes, Mayor.
Chief, did we check, I thought we checked with the legal counsel on using the ARPA funds for this.
We did submit it originally with the list of projects,
Yes.
and this one was not approved.
Was not approved?
It was not.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? So I have a motion as amended.
I'll move as amended, plus with the emergency clause.
Second, with including the amendment and emergency clause.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Is there anything else that council needs to bring before the Finance Committee? Hearing none, the meeting is adjourned.